Hi guys, I'm Mark. My story is about how my parents stole my childhood. Every day I lived like a prison. My parents raised me quite strictly and not quite logically, in my opinion. Just took and cut out my inner self. But as they say, there is a silver lining. My parents were careerists, so to speak. For them, the first goal was to achieve high positions at work, and they did not want to think about children. But fortunately, at the age of 40, they still decided to have a child. And it was not without their well-defined plans and schedules. Before I was born, my whole life was planned, every detail, where I should study, what to do in my free time, what profession to choose, etc. And since childhood, I never knew what street games were, what fights were. I didn't even really have any toys, as if there was only training. In general, everything was like the army. Rise at 6, morning exercises, breakfast, morning training, and so on until the evening. Most of all, I liked when Aunt Lisa came to visit us, because at this time, my parents were distracted from me, and I could rest in peace. And my aunt secretly gave me sweets. Just so you know, my parents only gave me candy as a reward. At those times, my parents were gone and left my aunt in charge. Before leaving, they gave a clear plan of action. But my aunt did not like such methods of education and just got me a toy robot from my bag, and I played with him all day. But by the evening, my parents, seeing I had not completed any of the tasks, were very angry and began to quarrel with Aunt Lisa. After that, my mother came to me and took away my toy and gave me the paper where my daily schedule was written. I was an outcast at school. While my peers were playing, I was studying. I didn't really have any friends. One day, just walking home from school, I decided to go through the park. When I saw the playground, I couldn't help myself and stayed there to play. I did not know how much time had passed, and I returned home in the evening all dirty and stripped. My parents immediately took me to task, and they started accompanying me everywhere. This was where all the problems at school began. I became the epicenter for ridicule, and everyone began to tease me. Once we had an art day at school, and we were going with the class to the cinema for a French movie, where I went with my parents, as usual. In the hall, one of my classmates shouted, "Look who's here with his old bodyguard," and everyone started laughing. I couldn't stand it and ran away. I ran for a long time and don't remember where. I didn't notice and rushed to my aunt's house. When she saw me on the doorstep, she hugged me and offered me to stay with her. The next morning, people started knocking and shouting at the house. I realized they were my parents. No sooner had my aunt opened the door than my mother attacked her with accusations, and my father yelled at me and put me in the car and took me back home. I have already completely lost the desire to perform any tasks and rules, and I locked myself in a room and did not go out until one day my aunt came over with representatives from child protection agencies. They found out the whole situation and decided my parents were not engaged in education correctly, and they said they would take me to a boarding school and my parents had to go to a psychiatrist. This meant that I would now live separately from my parents and we would only see each other on weekends. In boarding school, life began to develop differently. I made friends with many children, and in school, you can say I had no equal. I participated in various Olympiads and easily won prizes. I even felt a kind of freedom. Over time, I began to understand why my parents wanted so much that I did not waste time on various useless things. They wished me a great future and worked hard on my upbringing. My parents gave me an excellent education. I know 4 languages, and I participate in many Olympiads. I love them very much, and I'm grateful. But thinking only about development, they completely forgot that a child should have a childhood. I can't call my childhood happy because even though they were beautiful people, I had a lot of psychological violence in my family.
My name is Hope. I think my mother gave me that name for a reason. She had hope for the best, a new life without violence. Are you familiar with domestic violence? Do you know what this is? I think many families have it, but not everyone knows that this is what it is. I think many people think that this is the norm. I'm going to tell you a story about my family. My mother was 20 years old when she met my father. She said that they met at university and it was love at first sight. They started a relationship and Dad proposed marriage to Mom a month later. She agreed. After that, something began that you can never be prepared for. Dad started drinking a year later when he lost his job. He had a good job and couldn't believe he'd lost it. Only my mother started working. She was pulling on their little family, which hurt Dad a lot. Sitting at home, he began to drink. First once a month, then twice and every day. My mother didn't notice how it happened. In short, he launched himself completely, even stopped shaving. A year later, it turned into a real nightmare. My mother did not have time to earn money. My father already sold everything from the apartment. Their situation was complicated by my mother's pregnancy. On rare days of a sober dad, he surrounded my mother with love, care, and rejoiced at the imminent birth of a child. But when he remembered about alcohol, he raised his hands to my mother. He hit her on the head, arms, legs, kicked her in her pregnant stomach, sometimes set fire to her clothes. My mother's entire body was screaming in pain. Each of her scars told of a day when my father had been drunk. So it became a walking book. The idea of leaving him was not even considered, because she was so brought up. They say once he hits, then she loves, and if she married him, then bear with it to the end. My mother had a difficult birth. The pregnancy was problematic. So I was born by cesarean section. My father was very happy at first, insanely happy, but then he decided to wash it off, and it started. As soon as my mother returned from the hospital, she was met by an angry man with a hangover and demanded to bring vodka. My mother tried to do anything to keep him from touching me, so they lived for several more years. By the time I was 5, I was already clearly aware of what was happening. I still remember trying to protect my mother when he swung his fist at her. As a result, I was hit, fell to the floor, and broke my arm. My mother perfectly understood this pain. By that time, she already had almost everything broken. All her ribs, arms, legs, 6 concussions, and an ever-blue body with bruises. We were already known by local doctors. Neighbors called the police, took my father to the station, but my mother did not write a statement. He would come out, say thank you, and beg for forgiveness on his knees. And 2 days later, the picture would repeat itself. I grew up in this environment. I don't know any other environment, except from stories. When I became a teenager, I realized that I could not communicate with boys. That is, at my age. Almost all my classmates had relationships, first kisses, love, and so on, and I could not even imagine for a second that someone was next to me. I didn't have many friends either. The girls were a little squeamish about me because I was poor, almost always wore the same clothes, and didn't really communicate with anyone. I will emphasize once again, I thought that such a situation in the family is the norm. That was until I got a job. On my 18th birthday, I went for a walk around the city and accidentally saw a leaflet with the inscription, "Waitress required." Since I had experience in the service sector for a long time, I quickly got a job in a cafe. This money kept me afloat while my mother was still in the hospital with bruises. There, I got into a conversation with one of the visitors, and she invited me to work in an international organization. She said that I would study there and learn a lot about what every girl needs to know. I agreed and came to the organization's office on the specified day. I saw a lot of women there. All of them were of different ages, races, and religions, but one thing was common. They were all beaten at home by their husbands, or they were born in such an environment. From there, I learned that there are a lot of people like me in our city, but many people are silent about it because they are ashamed, because they consider it the norm, because they are threatened, or because they are under moral pressure. So the concept of family violence is not normal. It turns out that it happens that the husband beats his wife, then the police took him away, and his relatives, finding out about it, put pressure on the wife, and she wrote a statement that nothing has no claims. Is that fair? People who worked there said that most women tolerate this attitude because of not knowing what to do and where to go. But in fact, there are many organizations that provide psychological, material, and moral support to victims of family violence. I have learned my rights, and now I understand them at the legal level. I advise you all to familiarize yourself with your rights. It will be useful and give you confidence. After a while, I told my mother, and I tried to get her out of this shit. I'd already planned a new life without my father. I imagined that my mother and I were renting an apartment together, living there and finally enjoying life. But it turns out that for so many years, you can get used to such treatment. My mother began to cry and told me to go alone because there was no way to save her. I didn't want to hear those words. At that moment, I hated my father because he had crippled not only her body, but also her soul. And for that, I now don't trust people. I'm not confident. I'm afraid of men and avoid any intimacy, even friendship. for the fact that my concept of family is fear, anxiety, and danger. I do not want children and maybe do not want them ever. You may ask, what has become of him over the years? He still drinks, is very ill, and now does not even take breaks as before. The alcohol consumed him completely, and I lost all hope of an adequate conversation with him. And Mom won't leave him. It's strange, but she loves him, and very much. That day, I packed a modest bag of things and left the house. I knew that I needed a specific reboot, and I couldn't do it alone. Those people offered to help me, and I agreed. Since then, I have learned a lot, and gradually began to work in this field myself. Now I am fighting for women's rights, for the absence of family violence, for women to finally know that there is no physical violence in a real family, that it happens that you do not need to save a child from his father, that husbands can kiss, give gifts for holidays, and love, that the house is a temple, not a battlefield, and the family represents only love. So I share my story with you, so that you also know and remember it.